Oh, yes.
Alright, welcome back everyone. Today I'm very excited to bring you a review for the new Transformers War for Cybertron Kingdom Voyager class, Autobot Blaster and Eject. I'm unfortunately a little bit late to the party reviewing this guy because, sadly, I just haven't been able to obtain one until now. Hasn't really been showing up much in my area, hasn't really been available online. I luckily got in on the most recent restock there at Hasbro Pulse, so finally I have a blaster to review for you guys. Pretty excited. One thing that's pretty exciting for this guy is that he is an all-new mold. For the first time in a long time, he's not a retool of Soundwave or vice versa. He finally gets to do his own thing, which I think really is the first time since the original toys. When I look at, any modern updates to the characters or even like alternate universe counterparts, like your Fall of Cybertron or your Unicron Trilogy. I mean, they always share a mold to a pretty high extent, if not, completely. So I am pretty excited to be getting, finally, a new mold blaster here. So, let's kick this thing off. If you've seen my reviews before, you know how this goes. We're going to take a look at Blaster's packaging, then we'll open it up, we'll see the golden disc card, if it's something new. I'm not sure if I actually have all of them now or not. We'll see the instructions, and then we'll see Blaster and Eject themselves in both their alternate and robot modes. Naturally, I'll be doing plenty of group shots and comparisons today, and then at the end of the video, I'll give my final thoughts. So Blaster comes in your standard Voyager packaging for Kingdom. You can see our half window with the character right here. See that bright yellowish chest really just stands out in the shadows there. You get the characters' names up top, your brandings, and then across these front sides, you get artwork of Blaster in his boombox and robot modes, looking very, very nice. Across the top, we see his number. He's Kingdom number 44. Then when we spin this around, we get our renders. So we get Blaster in boombox and robot modes, Eject in cassette and robot modes. If this is your first time seeing Eject, you're probably wondering, why is he translucent? Well, a lot of people have wondered that. A lot of people are very unhappy about that. I can't say I'm super bothered by it. I'm kind of in the middle where I wish he wasn't, but it's not a deal breaker. I mean, he's still blue at least. But the idea is because Blaster is, supposed to be a legacy figure and really just gets a bit of an early release in Kingdom, kind of like how Astro Train, got bumped up to Siege. He does carry over a big gimmick that's part of Legacy, which is Energon weapons or accessories. And in this case, his Energon accessory just happens to be his cassette partner. Weird choice in my opinion. I didn't think, sentient beings were going to be Energon weapons, but I guess in this case he is. Yeah, I would prefer if Eject was just solid blue, but I gotta say it at least looks pretty cool. And it doesn't look like there's really any part of him that'll be really prone to too much stress and breakage. Hopefully. We'll find out more once we get him out. Right, we can see here that Blaster takes 20 steps to transform, and then they also show off the fact that he can indeed store tapes in his chest. And the tapes for Blaster, so far we only know of Eject, but I'm sure there'll be more. They are meant to be in scale with the War for Cybertron Decepticon tape characters. So when they're in their compact little rectangle modes, they should be more or less the same size. Now, we did see with Soundwave and his retool Sound Blaster that they're not exactly one size fits all, and some of those characters fit better in his chest compartment than others. So I'm looking forward to seeing how well Eject fits into Blaster's chest, as well as maybe testing out some other cassettes, especially ones that are known to be maybe a little too big for Soundwave. And just seeing, how the tolerances are and how much of an issue we may have in the future, getting Blaster's cassette partners to actually work with him. Okay, so we've seen all this. And then lastly, as always, and potentially for the last time, now that I think about it, we are gazing upon our standard Kingdom side panel, right before we move on to Legacy. Okay, here's the instruction book for Blaster and Eject. Get their names, their number, nice render here on the front. And it's funny because sometimes the renders are these cool little action poses, and then sometimes it's just a straight product render where all their arms are down at their sides and it's very boring. So I don't know how they determine which ones get what, or it's just kind of random. All right, this first bit shows you how to take Blaster's little pointy finger there and press the buttons on his abdomen, which opens his chest compartment. Lets you store Eject down inside. This shows you how to have Blaster wield his rifle. And then we get our transformation from robot to boombox. That completes around here. And on this side, just another demonstration of storing Eject inside of the take compartment. I mean, functionally it's identical to the robot mode, so, you know. This is the weapon storage for the boombox mode. And then we get Eject Transformation from cassette tape to his little mini robot mode. So covers all your bases there, everything you need to transform your new Autobot duo here. Here we get to see Blaster's alt mode, and you can see it's got a ton of surface detail on it that's meant to evoke the original alt mode of the toy. All those little knobs and stuff. Sadly, they don't turn, they're just molded details, but they are nicely painted. You get his little speakers here with like the guard going across them. A little bit of, I don't know what you call these, mini speakers, little subwoofer looking things right there. And then the buttons on the deck here, they're all one piece. You can see they have like your play, you know, rewind, fast forward, stop, all that molded in. But you push them to open up the tape compartment. You can see Eject inside there. And he fits pretty well. Slightly snug, but nothing too bad. That's his tape mode. And, you know, again, I would prefer if this wasn't clear plastic, but it does look cool. It's got this really nice icy blue quality to it. In fact, it's probably the same plastic that this window piece is made out of. Unfortunately, the whole door is molded in clear plastic, like you would expect with a modern toy, just painted over, you know, in some areas. So just be careful, you know, especially around the hinge area, you don't want to break it. And overall looks pretty good. There's that rifle storage on the back. And the back's probably the weak point because you can see a lot of the robot like form and details here. But aside from that, it's pretty good looking. You know, it's a lot smaller than the old Blaster toy, but it needs to be because it has to scale with modern, you know, War for Cybertron and Legacy figures. But it comes together very, very well. I like it. And it's got quite a few little 5mm ports on it too. So you could just have some fun and like put some sort of weapons and stuff on him. Have a dangerous music player. So I like it overall. I think it does the job. Especially for something that has to be scaled down from the original and also be, you know, highly posable and well proportioned in robot mode. I think it just turned out about as well as we could expect. Okay, here's a comparison with the alt modes for your original Generation 1 Blaster, as well as your Titan's Return toy. Now, our Titan's Return figure here, you know, it's kind of doing its own thing a little bit. One, because it's supposed to be a more modern reinterpretation of the alt mode, but also it has to share mold with Soundwave, so some details are kind of taken from that, like the cassette door button being on the top here, whereas normally it's down around, you know, the belly area. So when comparing these two, I think our new figure does a really good job of emulating not just the original toy, but also the cartoon design. It's kind of, you know, trying to be both at once. So you do see some differences as far as like the color layout, right? Instead of having any of this like grayish area here, it's all red, which is more like the cartoon. Plus, this new one just has a lot of added surface detail that's not really present here. You can see a lot more knobs and buttons and stuff and, you know, black lines, which does make it, you know, a busier, more interesting looking cassette deck. But I think as far as capturing the spirit of the original, this succeeds just phenomenally. It is, however, giving me a bit of a Mandela effect. You can see there's a much cooler gray on this toy than there is on either of these. And now it's got me questioning, were the grays on my vintage Blaster, were they always this brownish looking? Like, did it come that way? I know it was already, you know, kind of a brownish shade of gray, but was it that bad, like, out of the box, or has mine actually gone and, like, yellowed with age already? It's really got me wondering. I don't know, maybe light has already done a number on this plastic, or this one is just throwing me off because they use such a very neutral and cool shade of gray. I'm not really sure. Could all just be my imagination, could not. But I will say that shade of gray used is probably the biggest departure color-wise that this new toy has over the original. Our other alt mode comparison involves the Netflix Soundwave toy. And for any that don't know, this Soundwave is actually a very heavy retooling of the Siege Soundwave that converts the mold from having a spaceship alt mode to his traditional cassette deck. And overall, it does a good job. It's a little bit compromised in the design just because, unlike Blaster here, this guy wasn't made from the ground up to turn into this alt mode. They had to really kind of shuffle things around. And I will say, from the front, I think he looks really good. On the back, I think there's just way too much kibble. Like, when you compare it to Blaster here, You know, he's very flat. Yeah, you can see some details of the robot mode, but the shape is there. This guy, he's just kind of got everything slapped on the back there. So I think that Blaster does a better job, but it's also to be expected because, you know, this mold had to be redesigned from something else. Blaster just gets to do his own thing right off the bat. Though I will say this situation has me pondering, what would a Siege Blaster have looked like? And what would he have turned into? Honestly, maybe it's for the best that we didn't get one, because he probably just would have been a Soundwave retool at that point. Probably just would have the same, you know, spaceship alt mode. Be happy to be wrong, but I don't know. I have a feeling that's what they would have done, kind of like with the Fall of Cybertron stuff. Now I'm going to move the focus to Eject a little bit. And you can see I have him grouped with all of Soundwave's cassettes from War for Cybertron. Now I keep calling them cassettes. I don't know if that's really even accurate anymore. The only one of these that even attempts to look like a cassette tape is the Ravage, and specifically the Ravage from the Netflix version. None of these other guys are really anything more than rectangles as far as their details go. And in fact, I don't think any of them are actually billed as cassettes. In fact, your War for Cybertron toys were actually considered basically armor or shields. That's why they all have these like little flip out pegs on them. Eject here actually does not have a peg, so they seem to have dropped that, you know, whole idea behind the cassette characters, which I don't know if I missed it or not. I can't say the pegs were ever really in the way, so they didn't hurt anything. But I also don't really know anyone that looked at these things and thought, hey, that's armor, you know? So maybe it's best just to nix it, especially if, you know, that little bit extra budget can go into something else. But you can see that at first glance, all of these guys in their alt modes seem to be pretty much the same size. So you would think, oh, they should all fit. But we do know, however, that a lot of them had a hard time fitting inside of Soundwave's chest. So what we're going to do is break out Blaster again, and we're going to do a little tryout here and just see what fits. Now, we already know that Eject is good. He fits in there quite well. Let's open this up. So first, let's start with Laserbeak. See if he goes down in there okay. Little snug, but I think he's good. Yep. I'll call that a pass. He seems to be doing pretty well. Might be a little hard to take out because of the way he's shaped. There we go. All right. Next, we'll do Frenzy. We got Frenzy and Rumble here. And, I mean, they're both the same mold, so I'll just do one of them. So let's get Frenzy down in there. See if he works. Little tall. Definitely scrapes the top a little bit. Make sure he's pushed down all the way. Pretty sure he is. Yeah, he's in there. Okay, so he rubs the top, but he does seem to be a fit, so that's good. That's good. All right, next we have Ratbat and Wing Thing. So we could do either one of them because they're the same mold too. Go ahead, push him down. He's a little wide. He's a wide boy. He doesn't want to fit in the sides here. I think that's the issue we have with Soundwave too. Okay, he's in there. And he goes in okay. So he's got a lot of friction to him and definitely pushes the edges, but once he's in there, he fits. So that's good. And then the last one is Ravage. Let's see what Ravage does. All right, again, pretty tight around the sides there, but plugs in just fine. So it does appear that Blaster does a much better job at actually being a cassette player than Soundwave does, because I had no real issue getting those in there, whereas with Soundwave, I think, for the Rumble and Ratbat molds, like, neither one of them worked very well with him at all. Like, to the point where I wouldn't want to put them in there because I was afraid of breaking his door, so it seems they've at least taken that into consideration when designing Blaster and gave him, you know, a little more clearance when it comes to actually fitting these cassettes inside. At least that's what I hope happened. Otherwise, it's just out of pure dumb luck that this actually works. I like to give the designers credit. They actually planned for this based on feedback, but who really knows? All right, let's do Eject Transformation real quick. Pretty simple, even more so than a lot of the other cassettes. But sometimes you just got to keep it simple, right? So first thing you do is unfold his feet like this. Bring the legs down and then rotate the lower legs around to face forward. Just like that. Then you pull his arms out from his sides, rotate them, pose them. And then lastly, the head. And it's just a nice little ball joint here. And you got to get some purchase with like a fingernail or something to kind of pry it out of there, but luckily it's not very tight. And that's it. Boom. Ejects robot mode. Little guy, but he really looks the part. I mean, this looks like Eject. He's got the right head, the right proportions, he's got those big pauldrons. His feet are cool because they're squared off on the outside so that the little rectangle or cassette mode works very well. But then inside, you see the indentations of his shins and his feet. So I think it's a really good compromise there. The hands are kind of the same way, how you kind of have this, little bit of kibble or paneling on the outer forearms. But then, he's still got the right hands, tapered forearms, everything. And he also happens to, end up with 5mm ports on his forearm. So he could wield some big old weapons despite being a tiny little guy. The head naturally is articulated. It's on a ball joint, so it can turn side to side. It could also kind of lean back a bit, or a lot, if you want to, put him in a very unnatural pose. And overall, I am very satisfied with this. I think the only way they could have made this better is if maybe they gave him waist articulation, which I think they could have done, right? I don't see a reason why this couldn't have been, separate pieces on a mushroom peg, but oh well, probably budget. Overall, though, I think he looks really good, even with the clear plastic. He looks exactly how you would expect him to at this scale. And here's another group shot with Eject's Decepticon counterparts. So you got your Rumble and Frenzy duo, Ravage, Laserbeak, Ratbat, and Wing Thing. And I understand the challenges of trying to make the cassettes at this scale, because this is the smallest they've ever been, at least in their classic forms. Could argue that those data disc versions were smaller, but as far as, something this small that has to turn into a rectangle, it's going to be challenging when you have so little room to work with. Because these guys are just absolutely dwarfed by both their Masterpiece and especially their G1 counterparts. And the challenge, it seems, has led to some very mixed results. Because while you have some really, then you get some that just look kind of off. You can see Ravage. I think Ravage is everyone's least favorite. They just turn him into a chunky boy here. And really, he does not resemble the classic character much at all. And then your more humanoid characters here, they do get a lot of the details right, but I think everybody's issue was with the fact that they were very squat looking and that they had these little, unarticulated arms here. And, I think a lot of people kind of wrote off, really getting a good humanoid form out of these little cassettes. But then we get Eject here, who just does a phenomenal job of being himself. And he's quite a bit more articulated than his Decepticon friends back there. Well, friend might be a strong word, right? So it does show that, with the right inspiration and maybe learning from past mistakes, they can really perfect this even at such a small scale. And I think before we saw Eject, a lot of people were concerned that if we ever did get an Eject or a Rewind, they'd probably just be like retools or recolors of these guys, because that has kind of been the MO in recent years. They did that for Titan's Return. They did that back in Fall of Cybertron, where, very, very similar looking. And thankfully, that's no longer the case, because these characters should look pretty distinct from one another. Like, the only thing they really have in common is the fact that they're humanoid. But other than that, the details on them are completely different. So I am happy to see them, create a way for Eject and his twin Rewind to look different from Rumble and Frenzy. And the fact that we do have a good-looking mold for this body type now really gets you excited for the possibilities, right? We could get like a flip side, the Rosanna maybe is like Selects or something. We strongly suspect that our Rewind is coming due to a leak about a potential twin cast recolor of Blaster, which I'll touch on more. But he does supposedly come with Rewind, which makes sense, right? It's already part of the mold, so all you gotta do is color it black. I would hope that maybe if they do Rewind, that they skip the clear plastic and just make him just regular black. I mean, it won't be the worst thing if he is like a really dark, smoky, clear color, but it's one of those things where you don't want to sacrifice accuracy for the toy gimmick. And Hasbro had claimed they were done doing that, after like something like Titan's Return, where everyone and their mom was a headmaster and people weren't crazy about that. They said, coming into War for Cybertron, that like characters won't be compromised by a toy, like a line-wide gimmick. And then we see that that's not always the case. And Eject here is a clear example of that, where they got this whole Energon weapon thing going on, so they decided to make them clear for some reason. Now, I don't mind a clear eject existing as like maybe some sort of special release or something, but for this being the standard release of the character, it's a little weird and probably not what most people wanted. All right, now we come to Blaster's transformation. So we finally get to check this out. First thing I want to do is remove his rifle from his back. And instead of plugging at the handle like it classically does, it actually utilizes this little tab right here on the handle or I guess a slot on the handle to go on this tab there. So you just go ahead and remove that, get that out of the way. And you split his little handle piece here in half like you do on the old toy. And just bring this down, have it tab onto his legs, like so. You want to lift this little skirt area thing up, very similar to what we have on the Netflix Soundwave. And then you pop this free. And you're going to have to fight with it a little bit, wriggle it, because it really likes to stay on there. But you can get it to come loose. You can see it kind of goes over the folded up arms here. So yeah, you just do that, straighten it out. Do the same thing on this side. And you can see he's got this pointer finger thing. I think this kind of catches when you try to fold this over it and can create a little bit of a clearance issue. Just be mindful of that. All right, so we get all this. We simply fold his feet down, much like the original toy. If I can get it to. No, that doesn't want to play ball. Cheat a little bit. Tilt the ankle so I can get in there. Kind of in there pretty tightly. You can get it. There you go. All right. You fold these little panels down, and then you fold the main panel in like that to close up the backs of his legs. So looks pretty nice. Now you've noticed that unlike the original toy, his speakers have moved to the insides of his legs. But these little grid things right here, they flip around and become new speakers on the front. And the whole reason for that is to deal with a bit of a inconsistency in the animation where in his boombox mode, you'd have these kind of guards over the speakers that would just kind of disappear when he transformed. So this is a way of getting around that, right? A little bit of fake part usage, but I like it because it's clever. These things flip away and become a different detail in that mode. So that's how you do fake parts right there. Instead of just having them both on like full display all the time. I like it. It would be nice if these flipped away too, to become, you know, some other detail, but I could see there being some clearance issues because, I mean, they share like pretty much the same space with these, and I don't know if you can get them all to flip in. All right, so the arms, you just kind of unfold them like that. They'll tab in where they're supposed to. And the fists fold in like so. Rotate it, get all straightened out. Very, very cool way to do the arms. It's definitely different. Does lead to some big open forearms, but if you're not used to that by now, you haven't been collecting for a while. All right, and you just pull that back panel back. Get Blaster's head out of there. Kind of like the feet, you gotta fight it out, but you can get it. All right, here we go. Here's his robot mode. Let's give him his classic rifle here. And, I mean, there's no mistake in this guy. This is Blaster. Like, through and through. Very excellent interpretation of the character. He's got a lot of details that carry over from both his original design as well as the cartoon design. He does have the cartoon-inspired head, which, personally, I prefer the more comic-inspired one with, like, the visor. But that's purely just my own personal taste. I'm sure most people are actually happy that he does have the cartoon-inspired head. The posability is everything you'd expect it to be. The head moves around on a ball joint, universal shoulders, bicep swivel, elbow bend. I will say, I did say everything, not everything, because he does lack wrist swivel since his wrists are just on this panel. I mean, they could have made that a mushroom peg, but they didn't. He has full waist articulation, which is nice. Universal hips, thigh swivel, single bend knees that get a nice deep bend, mold flash there, and he's got ankle tilt. So almost everything you'd expect. I'm a little bummed that there's no wrist articulation. They totally could have done it. They really wanted to. There was space there. Now, interestingly, he does have one thing that I kind of criticized the Netflix Soundwave for, that he's got this little like button skirt thing going on in the back, because rather than have like these details right here be that actual bottom portion of the cassette deck mode, they just use like a fake bit. So I still not crazy about that approach. It feels weird to me. I've seen them pull it off with other toys before, so I don't know why they had to resort to, having like a butt flap again, but that's the route they're going, I guess. So aside from my little nitpicks, it is overall a very solid figure. And before I move on, let's go ahead and show off that little button pressing gimmick of his. Go ahead, just set this aside. So he's got that molded finger right there, right? The instructions even tell you to do this. You just go, take it. It bends in a little bit too, so you can get like the necessary reach. And he just pushes his own buttons there. Not very well, mind you. I think it's more for show than actual function. But you can, kind of recreate that look of him, especially from the movie, right? Because that's, I think, probably his most famous scene of pressing those buttons there on his stomach and all those cassette guys coming out. Now, sadly, we only have one of those cassette guys so far. And that's something I'm a little concerned about. Like, we know there's a likely rewind coming. Past that, though, will there be more cassettes? I mean, the MicroMaster price point is dead and gone at this point. It stopped after Earthrise, and that's what they were selling the cassettes as in 2-packs. So where would we get more cassettes? Maybe like a Selects-based multi-pack or something as pack-ins with something else? It would be a shame for him to get skimped on these, because Blaster's cassettes, they really don't get nearly as much love as Soundwave's do. Now, part of that is just because Soundwave's cassettes are a little more famous and more iconic, but it is his gimmick too, so I hate seeing him get shortchanged when it comes to having his own little cassette army. I mean, the original Blaster toy did not even include cassettes like Soundwave did, right? Like Soundwave came with Buzzsaw, which reminds me, why haven't we gotten this War for Cybertron Buzzsaw yet? Like, the mold's there, but I don't know. Still waiting on that one. But yeah, so already, like, historically, Blaster kind of gets the short end of the stick when it comes to having minions of his own. And naturally, the new vintage re-release of that G1 toy also did not come with cassettes. And it seems that the vintage G1 line has been discontinued, or at the very least put on pause, because they haven't released anything since then. It's all Beast Wars right now, which, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love Beast Wars, but that leaves a lot of questions as to what happened to the G1 reissues. Are they done? Are we ever going to get Blaster's cassettes? I don't know. So this new toy, it does at least give me some hope, because unlike the original, he does come with a partner, which is great. I love that. I mean, even the regular Siege Soundwave didn't come with a cassette. But I do have to wonder, just based on recent changes to the overall toy line, the fact that the price point where these guys were sold no longer exists, will we get more beyond just, this guy in his black recolor? I'd love to know. I'd really love to get, a Stripes and a Howlback and all that stuff. How about Ramhorn, right? I'd love to get a Ramhorn, that'd be cool. So we'll see what time has in store for us, but I hope they don't just leave us hanging there. I really want to see this guy's minions finally get fleshed out like they deserve. Here's our comparison with the other blasters in their robot modes. So we got our G1, or, the reissue of it, and then our Titans Return toy. Now, I said this about Soundwave, and I'll say it again here. I actually think this is a great toy. I always love the Titans Return version of both those characters. Like, yeah, it's a shame that they share a mold, but they did do a lot of retooling between them, so I'll give them credit for that. And it's true that they're, not going to be nearly in scale with your current collection, but just as a standalone, I always thought this guy was great. Maybe the worst mode was the boombox mode, but considering the fact that it had to become both, his classic alt mode and robot mode, and turn into a base on top of that, I think it actually looks really good. And I love the way his robot mode looks. It's very dynamic and very sleek looking. It also has that comic-inspired head I told you about with like the visor going on, and honestly, I prefer this to that. Like, if I could have this toy, but with that head design, I would be that much happier. Of course, not everyone's going to agree with that, but I personally think his is better. And then we get the original, very iconic toy. A little more posable than some of his early Generation 1 friends. And it's funny because he absolutely dwarfs Generation 1 Soundwave. Like, they're not even remotely in scale with each other. The G1 Soundwave's closer in size to this guy. So, yeah, very big boy. Of course, the trade-off is that he is pretty hollow and is like almost completely made of plastic as opposed to having die cast. And he doesn't come with a partner, which is why he was actually quite a bit cheaper than Soundwave. I think Soundwave retailed the vintage re-release for $50, and this guy, I believe, was only $30. So big price difference, despite the fact that he's way bigger. But he did, set the standard. This was, a lot of people's favorite character and toy from back in the day. I remember a friend of mine having this and being just so jealous that he had one and I didn't. So, finally having that toy in hand, I can see why he is such an icon. And he has, so much playability when it comes to interacting with his minions and stuff. And now you take all that and you put it in a modern re-release with modern posability, better proportions, and even better interactivity with his fellow Transformers because, he uses like that universal 5mm port system all over him. He's got them right here on the leg handles, forearms, shoulders. He's got quite a few on his back there. So, he plays a little better with his, contemporaries than this toy did. This came from, your Microman change line, whereas the bulk of the Autobots came from Diaclone, right? So it was big old Frankenstein toy line back in the day. So now you can get something that just plays a little nicer with your other Autobots and Decepticons, as far as, a toy display and playing around. And now we get to see him next to his arch rival Soundwave in his robot mode. And you can see that while they scale much better, Blaster still is a fair bit taller than Soundwave. Fear not, he is supposed to be. That is actually cartoon accurate. He has always been just a little bit taller than Soundwave, which I imagine was probably influenced by the size disparity between their toys. You never really think of Blaster as like a big, intimidating character. Soundwave, on the other hand, usually strikes fear into people's hearts, but he's actually kind of a short stuff, compared to some other characters. So, yeah, it works out, and they look pretty much perfect together. They look like rivals. And this really evokes the old Headmasters episode where they have their battle to the death shortly before they are reformatted or rebuilt into Twincast and Sound Blaster, which, has me, really hoping that that Twincast rumor is true. Supposedly, through some means, I don't know if it's going to be selects or whatever, this guy is going to be recolored as Twincast, and that's very exciting for me. Because unlike Soundwave, where just about every toy of this character that's made gets a Sound Blaster recolor at some point, poor Blaster here, aside from the original Generation 1 Twincast, has never had that honor. There hasn't been, a Generations Twincast. And no, I'm not counting the Titan Master on the Leader Class guy. Like, yes, it is called Twincast, but it's just a mini Blaster, it doesn't count. So, Generations hasn't had it, the Fall of Cybertron, all that didn't have it, like, the Unicron Trilogy one didn't have it. So I'm very excited for that, because I've never owned a Twincast toy, and, trying to track down an original, or even the reissue they did some years back, would cost me a very pretty penny, so I am all in for a modern Twincast. Plus, he'll come with Rewind, so that is also awesome. Now, I do wonder if this Soundwave is also going to get the Sound Blaster treatment. His Siege version actually got two. He got one from Netflix, and he got a Takara Tomy only one, which was done up as a mercenary, as, seen in the Netflix cartoon. I still have to finish a review on that guy. I do have the mercenary one. I just haven't finished his review yet. Always behind, you know me. So yeah, I am very much looking forward to being able to recreate, like, their final battle and their eventual upgrades if they get them. We'll see how that goes. Speaking of battles, this is something I've been wanting to do since I got this guy. Here we go. Blaster and Eject, against all odds. Against Soundwave and his whole army of minions. Not only is this cool, but this also really demonstrates just how much they need to get on the ball of, like, creating more minions for Blaster. Because right now, he is severely outnumbered here. But yeah, this shot just demonstrates how much fun you can have when you get, like, proper modern updates of all your favorite characters. Because it's been a long time since we've had a proper Blaster. In fact, I would argue this is kind of the first time we've had a proper Blaster. Because lately, he's always just been a recolor or retool of Soundwave, or, a shared tooling where they each kind of had a little of each, character's details there. We finally have a Blaster that does his own thing, and that is the first one we've had since the original. Unlike Soundwave, Blaster never got a masterpiece, which is really odd because some of his cassettes did. Like, some of them had unique tooling and everything, and they exist, but there's no one to put them in, so I don't know what happened. Probably had plans for one that got canceled or something. So this really is our first proper blaster since the G1 toy. And I think he looks phenomenal. I think he pairs really well with Soundwave. The fact that they maintain that, cross compatibility between the cassettes is very much appreciated. And as it turns out, Blaster actually does a slightly better job of that. He's got just a little bit more clearance inside, so you can have him house all of the cassettes, where Soundwave sadly can't really support all of his. So I think this release is just a win-win, whether you just want Blaster for himself because you think he's cool, whether you want to pair him up against Soundwave. He is, without a doubt, a very exciting release. And this completes our look at the new Kingdom Blaster and Eject. I gotta say, I really love the way this came out. It is nearly a perfect interpretation of the character. There are some little nitpicks I have, like I'm not really crazy about the little butt flap thing. If they were gonna have it, at least they could have made it like fold up better or something, because it's kind of really out there and a bit of an eyesore. And on my personal preference, I'm not super stoked about the like hyper cartoon accurate head. I think either like comic accurate or somewhere in between would have been better as far as the shape and everything. But I also recognize that's totally just my preference. And cartoon accuracy just appears to be, the MO from here on out. So, Generations is go the way of Masterpiece, unfortunately. Eject, I absolutely love, and really just exceeded my expectations for what they could do with these tiny little cassette bots. And he's got me really excited to, look forward to, what may come in the future. We know he's already getting one recolor. Whatever comes after that, who knows? Will there be more recolors? Will there be more new molds? I hope so. I really hope they don't leave us hanging because these guys are really cool. So yeah, the total package I think is pretty immaculate. The best you could really ask for at the Voyager price point. Honestly, I'm surprised it came with a cassette and it's still just a Voyager price because they sold Siege Soundwave without his cassette, I don't know, maybe there's something different in the engineering or something that makes Blaster himself cheaper than Soundwave to manufacture. That could be the case. But I'm very happy with this. I think outside of like expensive third-party stuff, you're not going to find a better Blaster toy. I think it's just the best one since the original. And I think anyone who's trying to track him down will be very happy to get one. Now, he's been pretty hard to come by, especially in my neck of the woods. Been very few sightings in my area, and they're always at the worst times too, like when I can't get over there. And then online, he's been pretty much a ghost. Hasbro actually got him in stock twice, like briefly. I missed the first one. He was gone before I even knew he was, supposedly restocked. I did catch a second one, which is how I got this guy. And I'm really happy I did because he's very cool. Just a really good way to help, round out the Kingdom collection. So if you're trying to get one, I highly recommend him. Understand it might be frustrating tracking one down, but if that's the case, don't fret too much because he is getting that Legacy re-release. It's going to be the exact same toy, just new packaging, and it'll be much more widely available being a Wave 1 figure. So if you can't get him now because you can't find it or maybe you don't have the funds, just hold out another month or two, I think, is when you'll start seeing like the Legacy toys showing up here on shelves. And I think you'll be very happy that, you let your patience pay itself out. Of course, that is just my take on Blaster. So now I want to know what you all think of this toy. Do you think he's as good as I do? Is this like your quintessential Blaster from now on? Or are you more critical of the toy? Either maybe you don't like the character, you don't like the way this turned out, or some other reason. Any and all feedback's always welcome in the comments section. If you enjoyed this review, make sure to toss it a like. Let YouTube know you want to see more stuff like this. If you do want to see more like this, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you always get a heads up when I post something new. And thank you for joining me for this look at the new Transformers War for Cybertron Kingdom, Blaster and Eject. And with all that said, I will see you next time.